It's rumor season, Seattle hockey fans, and the latest rumor is that the Seattle Kraken, once again, are close to closing in on a head coach. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here. I want to thank the everydayers. I want to thank the OGers and for making us your first listen or your last listen or a listen as part of your day. Again, Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, have been your host since the very beginning. Also, I'm a contributor to CBS Sports. I am in Vegas right now. Got to go to Las Vegas Aces training today, practice, and they got a big game. Kelsey Plum from UW coming into town. She formerly of the Aces, now with the LA Sparks. But let's talk about the Seattle Kraken. I told you yesterday, on yesterday's episode, we were doing the Q&A with Botterill, just talking about how that was an interesting, mildly illuminating interview with season ticket holders. I didn't harp on this too much, but, Botterill refuted some things that we had been hearing in media, and that being that there was no, at least as of the time of that Q&A, which I guess was a little less than a week ago now, the Seattle Kraken had not made an offer. Now, we had heard there had maybe been some offers made, and we're hearing now, once again, that there is a top candidate for the Seattle Kraken role. This is just as of today. We're hearing that Lane Lambert, someone who we've talked about on the podcast before, is high on the Kraken coaching list. During a recent episode of 32 Thoughts, the podcast, Elliot Friedman reported that Lambert interviewed for the job after Toronto was eliminated from the playoffs. Friedman saying, quote, "I heard Lane Lambert's interview went well in Seattle." So someone who potentially has interviewed for the job per reports, and someone who, as we continue to hear reports, is driving high up on the list. Now, I mentioned Mike Bennett on yesterday's episode, and in Mike Bennett's article, you can find it on, KJR, 933 KJR, .iheart.com. But in this, I'm reading this. What we hear is that Lane Lambert, one of a few different candidates. But here's what I liked from what Mike Benton broke down, talking about Lambert. And, he's 60 years old, so let's just get that out of the way. Some people really like to bring in age into this. Fired through 45 games of his last season with the New York Islanders. He spent 2018 through 2024 with the Islanders, including the 2022-23 and 23-24 season, or at least part of the 23-24 season as the head coach. He did overlap with Jordan Eberle there 6 seasons. Now, he also spent time with the Nashville Predators in 2011 through 2014, and with the Washington Capitals through 2014-2018. And 14 through 18 is when he overlapped with Burakovsky and Stevenson. Now, none of the 3 of these players had their highest numbers while Lambert was coaching. Now, I don't know if you can say that had to directly do with Lambert or whatnot, just an observation that I made. I looked at some of their numbers. And Stevenson, actually, Stevie, as he's known, didn't play much at all, while Lambert was an assistant head coach there. Now, the interesting thing, thinking about, maybe it's significant regarding playing time, maybe it's not, but some of the things that Lambert is known to do, I think, really speak to what the Seattle Kraken want to improve on, which is probably why his name continues to surface as, if not a candidate, maybe now the top candidate for the Seattle Kraken vacancy. Lambert ran the team's defense and penalty kill, talking about his time with the Toronto Maple Leafs most recently. The Leafs surged from 21st in goals allowed last year to this most recent season, tied for 8th at 2.9 per game. And penalty killing enjoyed a marginal jump, improving from a tie for 22nd to 17th in the league. And so Lane Lambert overall, we continue to hear, is a candidate that can really shore things up defensively, can shore things up on special teams, both of which sound pretty good to me. Of course, this doesn't necessarily fix if you are a little bit concerned about the coaching carousel and, are we just getting and recycling the same players? That's this potential candidate in Lane Lambert is not going to fix that. But is he perhaps the right guy for the job? He could be. I don't know much about Lane Lambert, only what I've been reading recently. I like, again, if there's going to be a focus on defense, if there's going to be an increase in effectiveness on special teams. But for me, and I don't ever see this explicitly associated with Lane Lambert. So if you are watching or listening to this episode and you have some more insight on Lane Lambert, let me know. But I have not seen anything explicitly linking him with player development. And it sounds like the Seattle Kraken job is still in player development because of some of the young talent that is currently on the roster. Now, if you retain Jessica Campbell, which we continue to hear is going to happen, maybe you don't need a head coach that has that as their bread and butter, so to speak, but then they fill out their coaching staff, including what we are assuming is Jessica Campbell, with people who can do that. And I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure it's the right mix. It's the right philosophy that's coming in, especially if this is someone who, or the organization plans to retain Jessica Campbell, then Lane Lambert or anyone else is going to have that person on staff, and hopefully will work with someone who is very revered, that being Jessica Campbell, in the organization, because Campbell aligns with the Kraken's long-term goals and has already met success in some ways in some of that individual work, which is why, that really could be another reason why maybe Jessica Campbell not right for the head coaching role at this point in time, but can really perfect the player development part and piece of it, and seems to be doing very well. Shane Wright's confidence is getting there. Matty Beniers understanding what he needs to do a little bit better. We heard, what Jessica was able to do with a player like Ty Cartier and really accelerate his growth and development. So just something to consider. But Lane Lambert is who we are hearing. I mentioned on yesterday's episode, and we're going to be talking about this until we hire a new head coach, right? There are some other candidates. So I'll go through those again. I'll go through what Mike Benton has for you, because it's a little more detailed than when I did on yesterday's episode. If you listen to that episode, it's not going to be exactly the same, but you'll hear some overlap for sure. And yeah, everydayers, get used to these conversations, because we are definitely having this. So whether you make us your first listen, your last listen, your middle of the day listen, we're going to be talking about coaching, maybe not every day, but most every day until we get a head coach. And again, the rumor mill or the reports keep coming in, so we're going to talk about it. I do want to also talk about maybe why the head coaching role is still vacant. We're at about that time where Dan Bylsma was named head coach, the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken. Are we on time? Are we behind? Are we concerned that coaches that have been affiliated or associated with the hiring process in Seattle have gone on to take other roles. And it's not just one or two, it's a significant amount, I would say. And so I'm going to read parts of an article from the Seattle Times that are talking about, should we be worried about this? So gave you that Lane Lambert is the top choice per reports, that his interview went well. Going to talk about some other head coaches that might be in the mix, and then close out the show talking about if we should be concerned that the Seattle Kraken have not been able to lock it up and get their new head coach. All of that on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. This episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. If you are looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feeling fuller longer. Now, listen, I talk about all the time. I'm always on the road. Right now, I do have a handy dandy snack, but what would be great is with my high potassium snack here is if I had a small travel size snack that also packs a protein punch. And that's exactly what Wonderful Pistachios can do for you. Whether you get the shelled or non-shelled version, either way, it's a good time. So get snacking and get cracking, Seattle hockey fans, with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, whether we're your first listen, your last listen, I know it's a little late still, or just a middle of the day listen. We're so grateful. Hopefully those listening on audio only, make sure you're safe. Put in your headphones. Be respectful of the people around you. 10 and 2, or, whatever they teach at driver's education these days. Whatever, do that. I am really grateful for those who are everydayers, for those who are commenting on YouTube. So many thoughts about Jessica Campbell, so many thoughts about who we should pick in the draft. We're going to get to that as well, but this coaching thing we got to nail this. And here are some other names that we have seen reported. I kind of dropped these yesterday, but I want to go into them a little bit more. So in addition to Lane Lambert, who I talked about in the first segment, Mitch Love and David Quinn are also rumored or reported to be considerations for the Seattle Kraken. Mentioned that Lambert is 60, so we will go in descending age order. David Quinn, 58, has the most NHL experience of the head coaches that we are going to talk about in this segment. This, again, is coming from Mike Benton's work with the Kraken Audio Network. Most recent stop was with the San Jose Sharks. I'm going to tell you right now. For me, that's an immediate no. There's not much that I enjoy about the San Jose Sharks, not only because they're a division rival, but I mean, if we're hashtag defenses for nerds, that's not the right fit. That's not the right fit. And, if you're a coach, do you go in and give the style that is needed for the team that you're coaching? Do you get hired by a team because they like the style that you can bring to a team? I mean, we can have that conversation, right? But I just don't like the style of San Jose. I'm just putting it out there. Not my vibe. So that alone is a no for me, dog. He also spent some time with the Rangers, was fired after a 1954-9 record with that rebuilding, with the Sharks roster, which was rebuilding. His only trip to the playoffs was in 2019-2020 in the COVID bubble when the Rangers were swept by Carolina in the qualifying round. He was on the bench with Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. The two are said to be close friends, so there you go. He was given power play and responsible for defensemen and got mixed results and the Penguins were not a playoff team. So someone who's dealing with the power play, dealing with defensemen, the Penguins power play did increase from next to last to sixth in this most current season. Defensemen like Erik Karlsson or Adam Fox are attributed to David Quinn, but the defense for the Pens was a problem, fourth worst in the NHL at 3.5 goals allowed per game and 30.1 shots allowed per game. So, I mean, Lane Lambert, from what I had been seeing, high on the defense, high on the special teams. This is kind of a mixed bag. So David Quinn is a no for me, dog. But I told you yesterday on yesterday's episode, if you haven't listened, go check it out, that I'm petty. I also have been telling you for a few weeks now, or a few years if you've been with us from the beginning. Shout out to our OGers and everydayers. But some of you know that I was in Beijing. I covered Maddie Beniers and Team USA, but specifically Maddie Beniers because I'm the host of Locked on Kraken while I was there. And I wasn't a fan of David Quinn, how he deployed that roster, controversial at the time for Maddie Beniers to not even be in the shootout. I don't think he's looked great in the shootout opportunities he's had with the Kraken since. Are those two related? That might be a little bit of a stretch even for me. I'm just putting it out there. Sidebar. I'd like to see Maddie Beniers and honestly the entire Seattle Kraken team from my eye test do much better on shootout opportunities. Okay. Anyway, or penalty shots. That's a little bit of an aside. But if you're all about you need a lot of experience, which has kind of been my argument against Jessica Campbell. Not that you need a lot of experience, but you definitely need the right experience. This guy's got a mix of it all. International, NHL experience, NHL assistant coach experience. He also was at in the NCAA for nearly 20 seasons, Boston University, Northeastern, Nebraska, Omaha, 105, 69, 21 with the Terriers alone. Players like Jack Eichel, Brady Tkachuk, Charlie McAvoy, Clayton Keller, all a part of those BU teams. So David Quinn, it's a no for me, dog, but for very specific reasons. Let me know in the chat, what do you think about that? And then another name we've been hearing at 40, Mitch Love, second season as Capitals assistant, so working with Alexander Ovechkin. Love has a head coaching record in the AHL of 191, 77, and 27. That's a 693 win percentage. He was with the Calgary Flames affiliate. He has won AHL Coach of the Year awards, went to the second round twice, or at least the second round, if not deeper, in the AHL, excuse me. He at Washington, responsible for defensemen, and we know that Ovechkin took up a lot of the energy or the oxygen in the room when it came to what was happening with the Capitals. But the defense is considered a backbone of the success of the Capitals, per Mike Benton. So the defense for the Caps, which is something that Mitch Love was responsible for, considered the backbone of the Capitals team. They did make the playoffs. They didn't get as far as they would have liked, but so Mitch Love still learning about his style, not as much experience as David Quinn or it would look like Lambert either. So, but probably gets a nod for me with respect to what he's been able to do building up a defensive team. So all of that's all good and well, but there has been something that's been on my heart, on my mind, and that I've been saying in one way or another. You can sing the song. Do it. I'll let you have a minute. I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna getcha. That's the song we're singing, trying to find our head coach, right? But we need to lock this down. We need to find someone that's going to be the right fit, though. So I am okay with not rushing the process because we have to get this right. I absolutely cannot even conceptualize how difficult it would be to be in the next off season and talking once again about having to hire a coach. Like, that is worst case scenario for me, which leads me to talk about, again, something that I've been alluding to. And now there's an article in the Seattle Times that's supporting a lot of what I've been telling you, which is that, is this Seattle Kraken franchise desirable? Or should we even be deemed desirable? Given that there are some, pending questions and the writing's been on the wall, so to speak, is that a concern for potential candidates? And is that why perhaps we've seen some who've been rumored or reported to be connected to the Kraken go elsewhere? Let's talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. I'm going to read you this headline. And I just want you to know it takes us there. It takes us there. But I think we need to go there. So I'm going to read you this headline from the Seattle Times. I'm going to read it en toto. Okay. Came out just today, earlier today. As NHL teams hire coaches, is it time for concern with Kraken's search? By Mike Vorel. We're waiting is the first line, which, yeah, absolutely. Saying that Dan Bylsma's role has yet to be filled. Incoming coaches have been hired by Kraken competitors. Mike Sullivan to the Rangers. Rick Tocchet, we talked about, to the Flyers. Joel Quenneville, had to talk about that, to the Ducks. Jeff Blashill talked about that a little bit yesterday, to Chicago. Adam Foote to the Canucks. We didn't talk about Foote too much, but anyway, the question that Mike here is asking, is it time to be concerned about the Kraken's coaching search? I am not sure that I know the answer to that, but I do understand where the question is coming from with the names that I just listed off. Again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different coaches that were associated to the Seattle Kraken coaching search in one way, shape, or form by sources. 5 of those coaches have not gone on to be the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken and instead have gone elsewhere. And this is interesting because in this article, it also breaks down the record of the teams where, again, coaches that had been reported to be connected to the Seattle Kraken have gone elsewhere. And the only team from a record perspective in that cluster that we have a better record than, the Blackhawks. And this article posits that the reason that the Blackhawks might be more desirable than the Seattle Kraken is because, well, they have Connor Bedard and the Seattle Kraken do not. And then, of course, the article goes into some of the young whippersnappers that we have either on the roster or potentially coming to the roster. I think maybe I'm adding that last part. But Yanni Newman, we talked about yesterday. We have to figure out what to do with Berkeley Catton, who is mentioned explicitly in this article. But for me, as I've been saying, that might also be a little bit of a liability. Because if we get a coach that can do the defensive things that I've been talking about on today's episode and forever, if we can get a coach that can do that, if we can get a coach that can do better on special teams, but they cannot develop young talent, then what are we doing? Now, granted, I've already told you on this episode that perhaps that's not a deal breaker if we keep Jessica Campbell. But then my other thing, as I've mentioned earlier on today's episode, that if that is the case, then you need to ensure, and maybe this could also be a deal breaker, just putting it out there, don't know what the conversations have been, but it is not a stretch to think that a head coach is going to want to coach the way that they coach, which is why they're a coach and why they've been hired, why they have success, hopefully some success. And, that goes to the question that I kind of posited earlier. Is it about getting the right coach that you think can instruct and get everyone towards the vision and the dream? Or does the franchise build its vision and dream around the skill set of the head coach in particular? I don't know exactly what the plan is for the Seattle Kraken. I think there's a few ways you could look at it, including that. Let's just keep it real. Not every manager, let's just think of a coach as a manager, right? Pull this out from just the NHL. Not every manager wants to go into a situation where they have someone from the old regime. This is not a knock on Jessica Campbell. This is like a human thing. It happens in all industries. Whoa, I just threw my pen. I'm so excited. I talk with my hands. And I got my handy dandy notes right here. That's just life, baby. But the Kraken have already said, and they've already committed to having Jessica Campbell on this coaching staff. So if you're having conversations with someone who isn't down with that, or maybe reveals within the process that they don't know, they might not be the best fit to fall into that situation, then they're not going to be your head coach, or at least they shouldn't be. So what is this article saying? Sustained playoff team. What does that look like? Again, I continue to say, are we even sure the entire organization is on the same page there? I still don't believe so. But there are some great questions here. I mentioned the youths. Do the Kraken have expected stars? The article says that, it seems, is up for interpretation. And I think that's fair. I think that's valid. It's not what the Seattle Kraken are packaging and selling, but it could be the truth. Everything is about, well, we have seen so-and-so, Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, Yanni Newman, Riker Evans, Ty Cartier, Berkeley Catton. We just signed, Tyson Jugnuff. The potential is there. They're taking a step in the right direction. They will have every opportunity to earn a spot, yada, 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 yada. All the draft capital that we have, all of this stuff. These are hypotheticals. These are hypotheticals. So again, the question in this article, do the Kraken have expected stars? Up for debate. Do the Kraken have existing stars? Do we have the offense that is needed? There it goes again. I'm putting it down. Do we have the offense that is needed to be a playoff team, a perennial playoff team? I don't think so. Not as constructed. So unless you have someone who's a head coach that can take this roster as is and change it up, get more output, what are you going to need to do? You're going to need to make some moves. And I don't think those are moves that the Kraken know exactly what they're going to be, that they can commit to. And that might be another thing that's holding the Kraken back or delaying the Kraken from being able to get a yes, if indeed the reports are true that they have made offers. Again, according to Jason Botterill, it sounds like maybe there's a discrepancy there in what actually was offered, what was not. But I'm going to scroll down. You should definitely read this article, the Seattle Times. Check it out. It ends with a zinger. I'm going to read really the last three paragraphs here. They're not long, though. Botterill did note in April, it's not as if we're one player away right now from a Stanley Cup champion. We have to become a perennial playoff team first and then find our way. Again, I've broken that down, but that quote before, that's why I just used that quote, perennial playoff team. I still think it's in contrast to what we hear from Sam Holloway. I digress. The article continues. Still, considering the back-to-back firings of Dan Bylsma and Dave Haxtell, the Kraken clearly believe they're capable of being a perennial playoff team. Some people do think that, and we operate as though we are capable of being a perennial playoff team. Here's the last line. I'm just not sure the rest of the NHL agrees. I don't even think I agree. What do you think? Are we in position to be a perennial playoff team? Do we need a coach that is going to work with Jessica Campbell, particularly is going to buy into player development, not just for the young bucks, but for all of the team? Because, yeah, newsflash, bing, bing, we need it. We need it. How does the rest of the NHL or the hockey community see this team? I don't think that many people outside of the Kraken organization see this as a perennial playoff team. Is that impacting the coaching hire? I don't know. But I've mentioned it a few times because it's worth talking about. I do think that there are question marks and there are questions that this franchise should be prepared to answer when seeking to hire a new head coach. And if you've got coaches that are 60, 58, whatever the age is, those guys, here I go again. That was my pen for those listening on audio. I put it down so it doesn't fall. Anyway, those guys should know enough to know what questions to ask. I've never been an NHL head coach, and I'm asking very specific questions about the Seattle franchise if I were a candidate for the role, if I were interviewing for the role. My thing is, I don't think the Seattle Kraken can answer those questions right now, period, let alone in a way that's going to be enticing to a head coaching candidate or head coach candidate. Let me know what you think. I know I dropped some bombs there. I loved that article because it hit on so many things I've been talking about. I don't think we're ready, which is also why I don't want Jessica Campbell to take the role, because she has more development to do. Don't think this is the right position, because this is an organization that at best is just maybe getting their wires crossed. At worst, isn't on the same page. A perennial playoff team by next season? I don't know if I see it. Remember, the emphasis is on perennial. Season 2 was a drop in the bucket. We arrived too early. I've said that before. I was saying it while we were going through that. Dang it, that pen again. I was saying it while we were going through the playoff race, right? Or the playoff run. We arrived too early. What were we as a franchise going to do to make sure that since we said we don't want to just make the playoffs, we want to be a perennial playoff team, what did they do? Not enough after that season 2 run. Not enough. And I think that's evidently clear. But yours truly was telling you in the moment that wasn't a good move. Ultimately, I'm ending this with more questions than answers, but it is the off season. We will see how things go. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that this is a perennial playoff team as constructed? As constructed. Also, what are your thoughts on some of the candidates I talked about, including Lambert, who reportedly, is that top candidate? Dang it, I'm putting it down. Is that top candidate? That's our show. Thanks as always for making us a part of your daily destination. A reminder to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and we hold fast. We stay true and loud and proud. We say, let's go Kraken. Erica L. Ayala signing out.